The day Tyler Bennett asked me to help his mother move a bed, I thought it was the smallest favor a man could owe his best friend. By the end of that summer, I understood it was the biggest mistake I never regretted making. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 33, I run my own small contracting outfit outside Millbrook, and until that June, my life looked exactly like every other year of it. Wake up early, drive to a job site, fix something somebody else had broken or built wrong the first time, go home to a quiet apartment that always smelled faintly like sawdust no matter how many times I cleaned it. I wasn't unhappy. I want to be clear about that from the start, because everyone who hears this story later assumes I was some lonely guy circling a life that hadn't started yet. I wasn't lonely. I was just still. And stillness, I would learn, looks a lot like loneliness to people who've never sat inside it. Tyler and I had been friends since middle school, the kind of friendship that survives distance because neither of us ever expected the other to work for it. He'd moved out to Denver 2 years earlier for a job in logistics, the kind of job that came with a title too long to say out loud at a barbecue. We still talked every couple weeks, mostly about nothing, football scores, a show we were both behind on, whichever one of us had most recently done something stupid to his truck. So when he called me on a Tuesday night, I figured it was one of those nothing calls. "Hey, I need a favor," he said, no hello first, which was how I knew it wasn't nothing. "That's usually how these start," I said. "What did you do?" "Nothing, it's not me. It's my mom." I sat up a little straighter on the couch. "Renee okay?" "She's fine. She's redoing her bedroom. New mattress, new frame, the whole thing. She hired movers for the big stuff, but she needs somebody to help get the old bed out and the new one assembled, and I was supposed to fly back this weekend and do it, except work just torched my flight. And you want me to go stand in for you. I want you to go be a decent human being for 2 hours, he said. I'll owe you forever. I almost said no. Not because I didn't want to help, that wasn't it at all, but because there was something about Renee Bennett that had always made me straighten my shoulders a little, ever since I was 15 years old eating cereal at her kitchen counter after sleeping over at Tyler's. She was the kind of mother who noticed things. Not in a nosy way. In a way that made you feel like somebody was actually paying attention to your life for the 10 minutes you were standing in front of them. Yeah, I said. I can do that. You're the best, Tyler said, already sounding like a man who'd stopped worrying about it the second I agreed. I'll text you her address. She probably won't remember it's you until you show up, so don't take it personally if she looks confused for a second. I laughed. Noted. I did not expect to think about that phone call again for the rest of the week. I was wrong about that too. Renee's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac with mature oaks lining the sidewalk, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looked mowed out of mutual respect rather than actual pride. I hadn't been there in almost 4 years, not since Tyler's dad's funeral, and I remembered that day mostly in fragments: black umbrellas, a casserole dish someone forgot to label, Renee standing very straight at the front of the room like straightness was the only thing keeping the whole afternoon from collapsing. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been watching from the window, which I'd learn later she had been. Ethan Cole, she said, and something in her voice landed somewhere between surprise and relief. Tyler said he was sending help. He did not say it would be you. Would you have said no if he had? I would have said thank you twice as loud. She stepped back to let me in. Come in before the neighbors start writing their theories. The house looked mostly the way I remembered it, except quieter, the way houses get once the people who used to fill them with noise have moved on or moved away. There was a box of picture frames on the dining table, half packed, half not. A guest bathroom door with masking tape around the trim like somebody had started a paint job and stopped. Redecorating? I asked. Reclaiming, she said. There's a difference. I didn't ask what she meant by that. I would understand it soon enough on my own. The old bed frame turned out to be an ordeal nobody warns you about, the kind of furniture built back when people expected things to outlive them, solid oak, heavier than it had any right to be, with bolts that had rusted into place sometime during a previous decade. We got the mattress out first, awkward and sweating within 10 minutes, both of us laughing at how ridiculous we looked wrestling a queen mattress through a hallway built for people half its width. You could have warned me your hallway was designed by someone who hated furniture, I said, catching my breath against the wall. I redecorated in a house I didn't design, Renee said. Forgive me for the hallway's poor life choices. That's a bold defense for a hallway. I'm a bold woman. I looked at her for half a second too long after she said that, then went back to the frame like the bolts had suddenly become urgent. We got the old frame broken down and out to the curb for pickup, and by the time we started assembling the new one, sleek, dark wood, the kind of thing you buy when you've decided to stop living in somebody else's taste, my shirt was stuck to my back and Renee had tied her hair up with a pencil she found on the dresser. You're better at this than Tyler, she said, holding a panel steady while I lined up the screws. Tyler thinks instructions are optional. Tyler thinks most things are optional, she said, and there was something under that sentence, something tired, that made me look up at her. You okay? She waved a hand like she was swatting the question out of the air. I'm fine. Just, divorces make you reassess furniture, apparently. Among other things. I hadn't known. Tyler hadn't mentioned it, or maybe he had and I'd been half listening the way you do with somebody else's family news. I didn't know you and Robert had split. 8 months ago, she said, matter of fact, the way people talk about things they've already cried through in private and don't intend to cry through again in front of company. It was quiet. No big scandal. Just two people who realized they'd been living next to each other instead of with each other for longer than either of us wanted to admit. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not most days. She held the last panel while I drove the final screw home. Some days I redecorate a bedroom just so it stops looking like a museum exhibit of a marriage that's over. We got the frame built, the new mattress hauled in and settled onto it, sheets pulled tight at her direction because apparently I tucked corners like a man who'd never made a bed with intention in his life. By the time we finished, the afternoon had gone gold outside the window, and I was ready to grab my tool bag and head home with the easy satisfaction of a job finished clean. That's when she said it. The sentence that started everything. Before you go, Renee said, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed loosely, can you help me with one more thing? I should have felt nothing about that sentence. It was an ordinary sentence. People say it to contractors 50 times a day. But something about the way she said it, a little hesitant, like she wasn't sure she had the right to ask twice in one afternoon, made me put my bag back down without thinking twice. Sure, I said. What's the one more thing? She led me down the hall to a spare room stacked with boxes, the kind of room that used to be an office and had become, somewhere along the way, a place where a marriage's leftover belongings went to wait for a decision nobody wanted to make. A bookshelf leaned against the far wall, half collapsed, one side sagging where a support board had cracked clean through. It's been like that for 2 months, she said. Robert always said he'd fix it. Then he left, and I decided I wasn't going to keep waiting on promises that came with an expiration date. I crouched down and looked at the crack. Simple fix, 20 minutes of work if I had the right piece of wood, longer without it. I've got a piece in the truck that'll work. Give me a second. When I came back in, she was sitting on an overturned box, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite name yet. Not flirtation. Not quite gratitude either. Something more like curiosity, like she was recalculating something about who I'd turned out to be since the last time she'd really looked at me. You didn't have to say yes to a second job, she said. You didn't have to feed me either, I said, nodding toward the plate of cut fruit she'd set out on the box beside her without me noticing when she'd done it. Guess we're both doing more than we have to. She smiled at that, small and a little surprised at herself, like she hadn't expected to be caught being kind. Guess so. I fixed the shelf. It took closer to 30 minutes than 20, because we kept talking instead of working about nothing important. The neighborhood, Tyler's job, a leak she'd been ignoring in the kitchen faucet that I told her not to ignore much longer. When I finally stood up and wiped my hands on my jeans, the sun outside had gone from gold to orange, and neither of us had noticed the hours slide by. Thank you, she said at the door. Really? Both things. Anytime, I said, and meant it more than the word usually carries. I drove home that night with the radio off, which was how I always knew something had gotten under my skin before my brain caught up to admit it. For a couple weeks, nothing happened. I want to be honest about that because when people hear the rest of this story, they assume it moved fast, that there was some dramatic spark the very first afternoon. There wasn't. There was just a text a week later. The faucet's still dripping, you were right, I should have listened, and me driving over on a Saturday morning to fix it because it felt easier than admitting I wanted an excuse. Then it became a pattern I didn't name out loud. A cabinet hinge. A garage door that stuck. A fence board that had come loose in a windstorm. Every visit ended the same way, with Renee standing in a doorway or a driveway saying some version of the same sentence, "Can you help me with one more thing?" and me saying yes before I'd even finished thinking about whether I should. I told myself it was normal. Neighbors help neighbors. Friends' mothers get help from friends. None of that was a lie, exactly. It just wasn't the whole truth, and somewhere around the fourth visit, I stopped pretending to myself that it was. The afternoon that changed things happened on the porch, not inside the house, which felt significant later, like the story needed daylight and open air before it would let itself become real. I'd fixed a wobbling porch railing, one of those jobs that takes longer than it should because you keep finding one more loose bolt hiding behind the last one. Renee brought out 2 glasses of iced tea and sat down in the chair across from me instead of going back inside, which she hadn't done before. "You know," she said, watching me test the railing's new stability, "Tyler thinks you're just being a good friend." "I am being a good friend." "Is that all it is?" I looked over at her. The porch light hadn't come on yet, and the evening had that soft blue color it gets right before it commits to being night. She wasn't smiling when she asked it. She was watching me carefully, the way you watch someone when you've decided you'd rather know the truth than keep enjoying a comfortable guess. "No," I said. "I don't think it is." She let out a breath like she'd been holding it since the bed-moving afternoon. "I keep telling myself I'm imagining it. That I'm just lonely and grateful and reading too much into a man being kind to me." "You're not imagining it." "That's terrifying to hear out loud." "Yeah," I said. "It is." Neither of us moved for a long moment. The porch light finally clicked on with its little automatic hum, throwing a soft yellow glow across both of us, and Renee looked down at her tea glass like it had suddenly become the most interesting object in the yard. "I'm 19 years older than you," she said quietly. "I can do math." "I'm serious, Ethan. This isn't a small gap to wave away." "I'm not waving anything away," I said. "I'm just telling you it hasn't stopped me from driving over here every week to fix things you don't actually need fixed." Her eyes came up to mine fast. "Excuse me?" "The faucet dripped twice in 6 months before I ever touched it," I said. "The garage door stuck maybe once a season. I'm handy, Renee, not blind." She laughed, and it came out messier than her usual composed laugh, more surprised, more real. "I panicked the day you fixed the bed. I didn't want you to leave and I didn't know how else to keep you there for another 20 minutes. "I know," I said. "I figured that out around the third one more thing." "And you kept coming anyway." "I kept coming anyway." She set her glass down on the small table between us, careful, deliberate, like she needed her hands to be empty for whatever she said next. "I don't want to be the sad woman who found a younger man to feel better about a divorce. I've read that story. I don't want to live inside it." "You're not living inside it," I said. "You're the woman who redid her whole bedroom instead of waiting for somebody else to fix her life for her. That's a different story." "Is it?" "It's the one I've been watching for 2 months," I said. "It's a good one." She didn't say anything else for a while. She just looked at me across that small table with the porch light humming overhead, and something in her face settled, like she'd been braced for me to argue with her fear, and instead I just agreed that the fear was reasonable and unnecessary at the same time. "If we do this," she finally said, "we do it honestly. I won't sneak around behind my own son's back like we've done something to be ashamed of." "I don't want to hide it either," I said. "I just want you to be sure, because I'm not doing this halfway." "I haven't been sure of anything in 8 months," she said. "But I'm sure of this." I reached across the small table, slow enough that she could pull back if she wanted to. She didn't. Her hand found mine like it had been waiting for permission it finally believed it had. We told Tyler 2 weeks later, mostly because waiting any longer felt like the kind of lie neither of us wanted to keep living inside. I made the call myself. I owed him that much, at minimum, for handing me the excuse that started it all, even if he never meant to. "Hey," I said when he picked up. "You got a minute?" "Always." "What's up?" I hadn't planned exactly how to say it, so it came out plainer than I intended. "I've been seeing your mom." There was a silence on the line long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. "Say that again," Tyler finally said. "Because I think I heard you wrong." "You didn't hear me wrong. Ethan, that's my mother." "I know who she is." "You fixed her bed frame." "I know what I fixed." "This isn't funny," he said, and his voice had gone hard in a way I'd rarely heard from him, not even during the worst arguments of our friendship. "You went over there to help her out as a favor to me, and you, decided to date her while you were at it?" "It didn't happen like that," I said. "It happened slow, and it happened honest, and neither one of us went looking for it." "She's 19 years older than you." "I know the math, Tyler." "That's not the point," he snapped. "The point is you're my best friend and she's my mom, and now every time I picture either one of you, I'm going to picture this instead." "I'm not asking you to picture anything," I said. "I'm telling you because hiding it from you felt worse than telling you and having this exact conversation." He didn't say anything for a long moment, and when he finally spoke again, his voice had dropped from anger into something closer to exhausted. "Does she actually want this? Or does she just miss feeling wanted after Dad, after everything?" "That's not for me to answer," I said. "That's for you to ask her." He called her that night. I wasn't there for it, and Renee never told me every word, only that it was long and loud in places, and that Tyler had said some things he apologized for later and some things he never took back at all, because he still half believed them. She told me one line from that call, the one that stuck with her most, because it was the one that finally quieted him down. "I'm not trying to replace your father," she told him. "I'm trying to stop disappearing inside a life I didn't choose to keep living. Ethan didn't do that to me. He just happened to be standing there when I decided to stop." Tyler didn't come around fast. I won't pretend he did, because that would be a lie, and Renee raised me on enough honest lunches by then that I couldn't tell this story any other way. For close to 2 months, he barely spoke to either of us. One-word texts, calls that went straight to voicemail, a birthday dinner he skipped with an excuse about work that everyone at the table knew wasn't true. Renee never asked me to fix that the way I'd fixed her bookshelf or her porch railing. She said some things couldn't be repaired with the right tool and enough patience, only with time, and sometimes not even then. I hated hearing that, mostly because I wanted to drive somewhere and hammer the problem straight, the way I hammered everything else in my life. But some things don't bend to a level and a square, and Tyler's anger was one of them. What finally cracked it open wasn't a big speech or an ultimatum. It was smaller than that, almost embarrassingly small. Tyler flew back for a work trip that happened to land him in town on a Sunday, and Renee invited him for dinner without mentioning I'd be there, because she said if he was ever going to see it, he needed to see it plain, not staged for his comfort. He almost turned around in the driveway when he saw my truck. I watched him hesitate through the front window, one hand still on his car door, jaw tight, clearly running through every version of the night that let him leave without a scene. Then he came in anyway, which told me more about him than anything he said for the rest of the evening. Dinner was quiet at first, the kind of quiet that isn't peace, just held breath. Renee had made too much food, the way people do when they're nervous and need somewhere to put their hands. I passed him the bread. He passed me the butter. Neither of us said much beyond the necessary. Then Renee, halfway through the meal, set her fork down and looked at her son directly. "You can be angry at me," she said. "You're allowed that. But I need you to actually look at him instead of just looking at the fact that it's him." Tyler didn't answer right away. He looked at me for a long moment, the kind of look that measures a person against every memory you have of them, every stupid thing you did together as teenagers, every time they showed up when it mattered. "You make her happy?" he finally asked me, like the question cost him something to say out loud. "I try to," I said. "I think I do most days." He looked at his mother. She nodded, small, honest, no performance in it. "He does," she said. "More than I expected anyone to, this late." Tyler exhaled, long and slow, like he'd been holding that breath since the phone call 2 months earlier. This is going to be weird at every holiday for the rest of my life. Probably, Renee said. I'm not saying I'm fine with it, he said. I'm saying I'm done being angry at people for finding something good. I just need time to stop picturing it weird. That's fair, I said. You break her heart, he added, pointing his fork at me like a threat that wasn't entirely a joke, and I will make your work life miserable in ways you cannot currently imagine. Noted, I said, and for the first time in 2 months, the table actually laughed, all three of us, the kind of laugh that clears something out of a room that's been sitting there too long. Things got easier after that, not perfect, but easier, the way most real things do. Tyler still needed distance some days, still went quiet around certain topics, but he came to dinner more often, and eventually he stopped flinching every time Renee reached for my hand across the table. Small steps. Real ones. A year later, I sold my apartment and moved into the house at the end of the cul-de-sac, into the bedroom with the frame I'd built with my own hands the day this all started. Renee kept the porch railing exactly the way I'd fixed it, said she liked having proof of the day everything changed sitting right there in plain sight, holding steady every time she leaned on it. I proposed on that same porch, on an evening almost identical to the one where she first told me she wasn't imagining what was happening between us. I didn't make a big production of it. I didn't need to. I just handed her the ring in the same soft blue evening light, right before the porch light clicked on with its familiar little hum, and asked her the same kind of question she'd once asked me without meaning to start anything at all. Can you help me with one more thing? She laughed, already crying a little, already nodding before I'd even opened the box all the way. That depends what it is. Spend the rest of your life letting me fix things you don't actually need fixed, I said. Just so I have a reason to stay. You've had that reason for 2 years, she said. You just needed the excuse to make it permanent. She said yes on that porch, under that same humming light, with the railing I'd rebuilt standing steady behind her like it had been waiting the whole time to hold something up that actually mattered. Tyler walked her down the aisle 6 months later, and when the officiant asked who gives this woman, he said, her son does, and honestly, he's still getting used to the idea, which got the exact kind of laugh he wanted, easing the last bit of strangeness right out of the room. People ask us sometimes how we got together, and Renee always tells it the same way. He came to help move a bed, she says, and stayed because I couldn't stop inventing reasons to ask for one more thing. I usually add the part she leaves out, that I knew what she was doing by the third favor and kept showing up anyway, because some men wait their whole lives for someone to finally need them for the right reasons, not because they're convenient, but because they're wanted. What would you have done if your best friend's mother kept finding one more thing to ask you for help with, and you realized somewhere around the third favor that you didn't want her to ever run out of things to ask? And have you ever fallen into something slowly, one small favor at a time, before you even realized it had already become the most important thing in your life? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.